Hello and welcome to the Good Society Forum. My name is Emma Skye and I'm Director of Yale World Fellows and co-host of the Good Society Forum, which is a community of change makers around the world with a common quest to build the good society. My co-host is Alaudeen, a 2019 Yale World Fellow. Niz.
Thank you, Emma. And hello, everyone. You are very welcome on this, what I hope is a sunny, place where you are in the world. Thank you so much for joining us today and for being part of our community that, as Emma has said, is dedicated to building the good society, emphasis on the building. We want to create a community of practitioners and inspire people to do more. We have an online community where we are constantly sharing good ideas. We're reflecting back on things that we've seen previously with our webinars and also exciting new ideas as we advance as a community. You can find us on Twitter at GoodSoc Forum, on LinkedIn, and also on Facebook, where we have an exciting new page where we have a great ambition to get to a certain number, which I won't share with you by the end of the year. So please like us and share with your friends. If you have any ideas for Good Society Forum sessions in the future or wish to be a panelist, we would be really keen to hear from you. We are our community. So the plan today is we're going to hear from 3 speakers and then we're going to take your questions. So this really is an active collaborative endeavor for us with the Good Society Forum and really keen to hear from you. So as you have comments, questions, please feel free to place that in the chat function. And what we're really keen to do is also get a sense of where everybody is from right now. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to get a sense in the chat function of what city you are currently in as you are participating and taking part in this webinar. So just go on the chat function that you can see at the bottom of the screen and just type in your city. There we go. So we have Dean from New Haven, Heidi from Saudi, we have Zakir from Jeddah, Kim from Chicago, Ryan from Jeddah, Francis from Surrey in the United Kingdom, Hani from Abu Dhabi. A brilliant, rich community that we always have. We're really thrilled to have you here. Mika from Washington, DC, Moza from Sharjah in the UAE. Thank you so much for joining us today. Brooke, thank you for joining us from Stockholm in Sweden. As you can hear from some of these cities, we've become Karma from Beirut. We have a really great global community that we have the absolute joy of being able to call our community. Thank you for joining us. And thank you for being part of what is our last webinar of 2020. Emma, what are we going to be talking about today?
Well, thank you, Niz. And I want to say a particular hello to Karma, who it turns out knows all of us on the screen. So Karma in Beirut, thank you so much for joining us. So 15% of the world's population, that's 1 billion people, experience some form of disability. And people with disabilities often lack access to healthcare services, education, and employment. And COVID-19 has only aggravated existing inequalities. Now, although disability inclusion is now widely understood as a human rights issue, people with disabilities continue to face social stigma and are vastly underrepresented in most sectors of society, from sports to media to academia. So investment in the full social and economic inclusion of people with disabilities is central to the mission of creating a good society that leaves no one behind. Now, the United Nations International Day of Persons with Disabilities is on 3rd of December. And to mark that, we are today discussing the intersection of disability with all aspects of society and how to build disability-inclusive industries and communities. So our first speaker today is Sara Minkara, who is founder and CEO of Sara Minkara LLC, a diversity and inclusion consulting firm. Now, she's also a pioneer and creator of the Discovery in the Dark series and the founder and board member of Empowerment Through Integration. Leveraging all aspects of her identity as a blind Muslim Arab American woman, Sara promotes authentic inclusion to create genuine empowerment for herself and for everyone she meets. Sara has received multiple awards for her passionate advocacy, including Forbes 30 Under 30, the Echoing Green Fellowship, and the Clinton Global Initiative Outstanding Commitment Award. Sara holds a BA in Maths and Economics from Wellesley University and a Master's in Public Policy from Harvard University. Sara's an advocate, entrepreneur, and public speaker, and we are delighted to have her on the Good Society Forum. Sara, welcome, and thank you so much for being with us. Liz, can you unmute?
Sara, you're just muted at the moment.
Liz, you've got to unmute Sara.
How about now?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, beautiful. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you, Emma. Thank you, Nazmuddin, Mira, and Tiffany, and for the Good Society Forum for inviting us to this panel and creating a dialogue for the disability inclusion. Before I get started, I'm actually going to introduce myself in an interesting way, and then from there, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my story, the work that we do, and what does disability inclusion mean, and how can we achieve that. I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm a friend, I'm a colleague. I'm a troublemaker, I'm an introvert. I love nature, I love math, I love to eat chicken. I love audiobooks, I love horses, I love to travel. I am a woman, I'm Muslim, I am blind, I am a person with a disability, and I'm very proud of it. When I was 7 years old, to be exact, on my birthday, I woke up that day and my world was completely altered. I went from a world where I could see to a world where I could no longer see. We were in our summer house that overlooked these big, beautiful mountains, and that morning, I could no longer see them. I remember calling out to my mom coming and realizing that her second daughter has also become blind. She hugged me really tightly and she said, everything is going to be okay. And everything was okay. And that's because of the empowerment and the support that I received from my parents, my teachers, my communities, and my friends and everyone around me. My parents, my mom never allowed this disability narrative to enter our home, the stigma associated disability to enter our home. She never allowed the expectations or lack thereof around disability to ever enter how she interacted and how she raised us. But instead, she got us and encouraged us to see our disability as a strength. She got us to embrace our disability as part of who we are as an identity, not to hide from, not to discard, not to deny, and not to say, oh, I will succeed regardless of my disability, but instead, this is part of who you are. Embrace it and see it as a strength. She encouraged us to really have us really build out our dreams and say, what do you want to do when you grow up? And pushed us to have a future and live a full life. And we did. I continued to go into the public school system in my town. I went to Wellesley College, majored in math economics. I went to grad school. I was even able to hike and slide down a volcano in Nicaragua. And that's not because I had more potential or more ability, but that's because I had the privilege of being seen and recognized and acknowledged that I am a human with value and potential. The power of being seen is very powerful. And because of that, I was able to live a very much well-rounded life with a purpose. But growing up, I realized that most kids with disabilities are not living that reality. They're living a narrative of pity, charity, and shame. Poor you. You're less than, there's something wrong with you. You're different. You're a burden on society. And that's created a vicious cycle of disempowerment where then the kids with disabilities are marginalized, pushed to the side, and they're not living they're not able to live to their optimal potential. And because of that, I founded my first organization, Empowerment Through Integration, that focuses on disability inclusion. Disability inclusion from the lens of, it's not just a human rights aspect of including people with disabilities. Yes, it is the right thing to do, for sure. We need to. That's a human rights. We need to educate. We need to employ. But we want to come to a point that it's a value for all. Inclusion of people with disability is a value for everyone. When we don't include disability, we lose out as a society. So we started working on embracing that narrative across every single sector and stakeholder within a society. It shouldn't just lie on the burden and the shoulders of the kids and the parents. Everyone should embrace that narrative. Educators, policymakers, employers, everyone within society. But I want to take it a step further. Everyone in this room, in this virtual room, has a position and a power to make a difference, the influence to make a difference, because everyone in this room is either a parent, a teacher, an employer, a friend, a colleague, a neighbor, whatever you are. So you have the power to actually be part of this narrative of disability inclusion from a value-based perspective. Reflect on to what Emma said. Are there people with disabilities in our space? If not, let's make sure we reach out and bring their voices forward. If they are we including them fully? Do we have policies, frameworks, and programs that are we including them? And are they designed in a way that it's not from a charity lens, the policies or programs, but it's from a value lens? We have the power to make a difference. But I'm even going to take it a step further. Now with my new work in my consultancy firm, we focus on this concept of authentic inclusion. It's not enough for people with disabilities just to be in the room or have a seat at the table. We need to get it to a point that everyone can bring out their true authentic self forward. Because only through that, we bring out more of everyone's potential and value. So I want you to reflect on, it's not enough to have a seat at the table, but are we creating a space where everyone feels like they belong and everyone can feel like they can be their true self? And only in us doing that, we're able to really move towards authentic inclusion. So I want us to reflect on, how can we create spaces where true self can be brought forward? I've met so many people through my work where people have invisible disabilities and they're afraid of mentioning it to their colleagues and their coworkers because they don't want to be stigmatized. I have so many people in my work that people hide one or more of their identities because they're afraid of being pushed to the side or judged. So my ask of you is threefold. One, on a personal level, every single one of us, are we embracing all of who we are and are we bringing forward? Are we hiding one or more of our identities? And if yes, how can we turn that into positive? Two, are we doing the same things for others? Are we creating the space for others to bring their true authentic self? We can be an ally. We can actually make a change and help one another to really bring our full potential forward. Third, I want to conclude on this point. It's so important for us to apply this concept of curiosity through a lens of compassion. Be compassionate to yourself, but ask yourself questions. What are my biases? What are the narratives I'm creating for myself and others? And how can I start creating a narrative of beautiful assumption? And on the other hand, start initiating dialogues with everyone around you. Have one assumption when you meet a person for the first time. Delay all your assumption and have one assumption, that this person has something beautiful to contribute. And when you approach every single person with this assumption, you start creating a dialogue and a space of empowerment and inclusion for everyone, a narrative of value. And towards that, we'll start bringing in more value and more potential to society. Thank you so much, everyone, and I look forward to the rest of the panel. Thank you.
Sara, thank you so much. Incredible. I want to read out a few messages which have come through the chat function. Sara, such an inspiration. Thank you bravo to that last point. I think bravo to every point that you made, and I'm sure we'll be speaking about many of them later. Rim Al-Fahim said, oh yes, Sara, preach, lots of love, your sister Reem from Abu
Oh, Reem,
Dhabi.
yes, yeah.
So, and Gabby says, lovely, thank you. And people are clapping. They could listen to you all day. So thank you so much for that brilliant introduction. And so up next, we have Manal Ataya. Manal is a museum professional with over 15 years of senior executive experience in museum development and cultural diplomacy. As Director General of the Sharjah Museums Authority, Manal is responsible for the overall management of 16 museums in the Emirate of Sharjah in the UAE. Her mandate includes strategic development of future museum projects, advising in museum and cultural policy, fostering partnerships with the international museum community, and leading the efforts to deliver international best practice in museum services. Manal is responsible for the implementation of His Highness Sheikh Dr. Sultan bin Mohammed Al Qasimi's directives for future museum and cultural heritage related projects. She was awarded the Order of Arts and Letters by the Republic of France in 2018 for her contributions to culture. She's a graduate of both Hamilton College and Harvard University. Manal, thank you so much for joining us, and really look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you, Nizam, for that introduction. And thank you, Sara. You said quite a few points that have made me start now from a different part of where I was initially going to start. I loved how you began your introduction with identifying these different markers of how you describe yourself. And I think marking markers, or how we describe ourselves, is a very important tool for me, I believe, in thinking about inclusion and thinking about disability. And I see that from the point of view of everyone in this room, virtual, and I mean also in the world, has to think about this question, you know, who am I and what are those markers that I have, whether that's class, religion, gender, etc. And I think that's important because what it does is it allows you to understand your positionality, right? Where are you positioned within society? And by doing that, you will understand two important questions, or two important ideas. One, that position that you have, what privilege does it give you? And second, that position that you have, does it allow you to oppress others because of that, because of those markers, because of that position? And it's an extremely important self-exercise, institutional exercise that we all have to do, and one that, you know, I'm working on with the museum and our museums in general, but our museum authority, thinking about that, you know, understanding that our general audience may be a specific type of group of people with very similar markers, but we have a lot of other people out there who don't fit those. And are we oppressing them in ways that we don't intend to? And how can we make sure that those privileges that we have, that we are aware of them, and how we think about others who may not have them? And that comes into play with accessibility, something that the museum service in Sharjah has been, you know, extremely focused and dedicated to. For over 10 years now, we've been working on programs in this regard. A lot of it, of course, has been championed by the UAE government in general. I mean, there's always been many different initiatives from Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Sharjah, and the other Emirates to find ways to you know, provide services and legislation and policies that can help with people with disabilities. However, I should say that a lot more has been done only in recent years, including just 2 months ago, a statement made by the Abu Dhabi government, the UAE government, for a 5-year strategic plan for improving and making the UAE the best when it comes to its policies and its access and inclusiveness of people with disability. Just a few numbers I wanted to mention here is we have about 100 centers in the UAE that go under what is still here referred to as special needs. In our in our authority, for example, I just wanted to give you one figure. When we started in 2015 with special needs centers, that's what they were called here, we started working with them on programs. So they would come to our museums and we would provide bespoke programs for the whole range of disabilities, whether they're cognitive, hearing, mental health, etc. And autism is another. In any case, we started off in 2015 providing about 652 programs. Now in 2019, we have provided 5,176 programs. So this is just to show you how much the need is there, how much we've been able to work with children and their families and schools and centers all around the UAE, but particularly in Sharjah where we're based, which has been wonderful. But what I wanted to really talk about, I hope also today in this discussion, is also something else that Sara mentioned, which is about compassion. Again, this positionality and understanding where you fit will allow you, is a tool to allow you to understand compassion, or the other word I think of is empathy, how to understand and put yourself in the place of another and what it is that you can do. And I think we all have that, as was said earlier, we all have positions of influence that we can make changes, and we have to think about how we can use that, utilize those influences we have or whatever privilege we might have to really instigate change and action in our societies. So I'm hoping that in this discussion today, we can talk about all these different aspects of empathy, exclusion, inclusion, how it really can be put into action rather than in legislation that just sits there and doesn't really do anything, but stay in sort of a plan, and also how much it's about self-reflection and thinking about how you really work on your own self and your own institutions, whatever they may be, to really integrate and include inclusiveness in every aspect of what you do. Thank you.
Manal, thank you so much for that. And really, I want to thank you for putting together, it was you who came up with the idea for this panel. And again, thank you for suggesting it and for suggesting the panelists. Now, our third speaker is Dr. Heidi Alaudeen Alaskary, who's CEO of the Special Olympics for Saudi Arabia. And she has been the Managing Director for Diversity and Inclusion and Partnerships, Planning and Development at the General Sports Authority since December 2017. Heidi also served as a Deputy Executive Director for Research at King Salman Center for Disability Research from 2005 to 2012. And from 2009 to 2010, she worked as a lecturer in the Ministry of Social Affairs Autism Diploma Program. And she was promoted as the Director of Research Affairs in 2012 and later became the Director of the Persons with Disabilities Employment Program, Tuwafuk. But she remained associated with Tuwafuk until 2017. And Heidi is a graduate of Southern Illinois University and has a PhD in speech language pathology from Vanderbilt University. Heidi, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Emma, Nizamuddin, Manal, thank you for putting the panel together. And Sara, it is an honor and a privilege to sit on this panel with everyone. For those of you joining us tonight, thank you for taking the time and being here with us. And we're very much looking forward to your comments, thoughts and insights as we move forward. I have to admit, Sara, Manal, and myself, we had a bit of a sneak peek the other day. What was supposed to be a 15-minute discussion, get to know you, turned into about an hour of scintillating conversation that could have gone on all day. So I want to acknowledge that these forums are extremely important. It does not do justice to the topic. This is an ever-evolving topic that really is at the core of it about human nature. And for me, it's always, I like to simplify things as much as possible. And, you know, when Manal reached out to me and said the Good Society Forum, I'm like, oh my God, I love it. You know, we all want to live in a good society. We are all, what brings us together is our humanity. And at the core of our humanity, it doesn't matter how rich we are. It doesn't matter how educated we are. It doesn't matter where we're born, who we are. As a woman living in Saudi Arabia, I was constantly asked, as a woman from Saudi, what do you want? And I'm like, at the core of it, what every woman wants in the world. We want to be safe. We want to have a healthy family. We want children that will be happy and can thrive. If we take the politics away, we take, you know, all the luxuries away, at the core of it, we're human. We want to be accepted. We want to be loved. We want to feel a sense of value where we give and we can take from the communities we live in. What ultimately defines us as human beings is we are community beings. We have this drive and need to be part of a collective. And the minute we break away and isolate ourselves from that collective, we start to feel the negative impacts of that. And for me, this whole idea of diversity and inclusion, we have evolved into societies that like to silo people in these buckets based on names, based on characteristics. When, from my humble perspective, that takes away from our humanity. It takes away from the very things that connect us. And we thrive when we're part of that community. So I'd like to take a step back, and I would like to thank Emma for opening with a slogan that is very much used in our area of diversity and inclusion, particularly in disability: leave no one behind. And I just came off some work from the Think 20, which was part of our G20 here. We hosted it this year. And particularly with COVID, this leave no one behind slogan, building back better slogans have become critical and sort of central to many discussions. And I always take a minute, and I want everyone here to close your eyes for 1 second. Just close your eyes and think. Today we have 7.6 billion people in this world. Okay, so close your eyes and think, just try and imagine that number. 7.6 billion people. What do they look like? Where do they live? Who do they connect with? Who do they need to thrive? And how do we as individuals not allow one of them to be left behind? Because that's the commitment we're making when we say leave no one behind. It means we as individuals are buying into and promising that 7.6 billion people today, over 8 billion in the future, with multiple characteristics. In 2030, 25% of 8 billion people are going to be over the age of 60. A huge percentage, 15% or more, are going to be persons with disabilities, and a growing number, because as we age, we're more susceptible to developing disabilities as we age. This is a huge responsibility. I'm often a bit challenged whenever people listen to me talk. They're like, who do you have in your family who has a disability? And I always say, why do I have to qualify my passion for wanting people to be included by having somebody who may or may not have a disability? Can I not just potentially be a good human being who just wants to empathize and love and be inclusive of everyone else? I've had the honor and privilege of working in multiple domains, whether it's research, education, training new future speech pathologists, training people with disability and giving them what they need, the skills they need to work, working with amazing families. I have been so humbled and privileged to work with thousands of families in my career. And people will look at my career path and say, you've been in so many different domains: sports, education, employment. The one driving thread that connects all of those domains I've worked in has, how do I make that person the best that they can be on that day and make them as included in their communities. Every single one of those topical platforms, I often joke and say, are my Trojan horses to inclusion. And whichever one provides me with the fastest means to show that people bring their own, as Sara said, their own uniqueness to the table. How can I open people's eyes to see that it's not a diagnosis. It's not whether they're male or female. It's those inherent things that make that person extremely unique is what we should be valuing and leveraging and learning from. I will maybe be a bit more controversial here. I've seen both sides of the coin. I think people tend to, as Sara said, either come from that perspective of pity or, haram, we should support them, they need our help. But I've also seen people with disabilities who struggle in understanding our perspective on things and how we do things. And I think there's a joint learning opportunity. How do we come to middle grounds where we can all learn from each other and create that good society, our definition jointly, where we're all included? It's always a privilege to go last in these discussions because you get a view of what everybody else has already said. So I second everything that's already been said by Manal and Sara. I think what came out in our discussion the other day when we had the honor of speaking to each other is, we touched on things. What are different countries doing? What are different communities doing? What are different sectors doing? And I would like to take a step back. I think in my humble 30 years of working and serving in this domain, it is not about a country, it's not about a sector. I've been part of so many policies and seen so many conventions and worked in so many communities. At the end of the day, it is that one person who has the belief in another individual, whether it's a person with a disability or not. I have been supported by people with disability who've made me a better person, and vice versa. It is how do we identify as human beings and become that undying voice for that person who is not seen. Today, we're lucky. Sara's here, she's seen, she's being heard. There are hundreds of thousands of people that are out there that are not seen and heard. Every single one of us in this forum today, and every single one of us in our communities, it is our responsibility to take that a step further, to search, to look for individuals who don't have a voice. And those of us who have privilege, who have opportunity, who have doors open to us, it is our responsibility to bring their voices to the table. And because of that, I want to share with you, I'm going to end my few minutes here with giving you insights to the stakeholder group that I serve. I serve individuals with intellectual disabilities. I won't speak a lot about Special Olympics. It's a very well-established community and forum. You can research it very easily and we're available if you want to reach out to us. But again, it's the Trojan horse using sports to include people with disability. In my travels and journeys, this 1,000-mile journey that won't end till we sleep, I found that sports has been a magical tool to include people. And what I'm going to show you, you will not believe, this literally was just a mindset and will. We got a call saying that in 2019, if Saudi Arabia did not bring girls to the 2019 World Games, that we would be discredited as a sports organization from Special Olympics. So we thank the organizers and we thank everybody who pushed for that. And literally overnight, the decision was made, we're taking girls. We ended up going with 21 girls and 29 boys, or 50 total athletes, females and males. They participated in 9 various sports and they came back, irrespective of the medal count, they all came back champions of our hearts. They moved and changed at their own level. They came back thinking, I can do this. We had girls, we had some of our female athletes who went in and they wouldn't even look at you. They would sit and do this. And in 1 week, they were doing this and they came and they said, when am I going to be interviewed? I have something to say. It was beautiful. We had families who said, we're very afraid to send them. We're scared. And we see this a lot with families who are overprotective. And we negotiated deals halfway till we made it safe for them to go. And they said, we can't even believe, we know now. I don't know if everybody knows it. Me and working with families, particularly I work with autism spectrum disorder. For me, this is heartbreaking as a parent. Every parent that I've ever worked with, 99.9% of my parents, when asked, what is your biggest fear? Their biggest fear is, I cannot die because who will care for my child when I'm gone? The biggest gift we can do as a good society is tell a parent that no matter whether you're here or not, your child will be loved, they will be valued, and they will be included. So with that, allow me to just share this brief video. And what you see here doesn't even begin to capture the spirit of the happiness and joy and inclusion that we saw with these athletes over the week that we saw.
Unmute yourself. I think the music might come through.
And these are wonderful, wonderful scenes of tennis and badminton and all these sports, basketball, table tennis, running. Medals, lots of medals.
Wonderful.
So I hope everybody got to see that and experience just a glimpse of what we experienced. And I just want to close with just a very quick story, because I think this summarizes what we felt. What you saw there was not one athlete, one gender, one type of disability. It was whole communities coming together as a whole, as a society, to support our athletes and to be part of one group activity that brought us together as human beings. The story I want to end with was, at one point we had 4 swimmers, and one of the swimmers was being medaled outside, and his mother couldn't be found. And we were frantically looking for her, saying, you know, where's Faris? Where's Faris? Faris is gonna get his medal. She's not here, she has to be here to see him get his medal. And we finally found her, and she was sitting inside the actual competition arena, watching one of the heats getting ready to start. And when we found her, I said, Faris is outside, he's gonna get his medal, you have to go and be with him. And she looked at me and she said, Badr is here and he's swimming and his parents couldn't make it. I'm gonna stay with Badr, you go with Faris, and we're here together as one team. And to me, that really summarizes what diversity inclusion is about. So thank you for listening and for your time, everyone.
Heidi, thank you so much. Where to even begin? I mean, Heidi, Sara, Manal, you've really set the scene for us and posed the challenge to everybody. And I couldn't dare try and summarize what we've talked about so far. So I want to open this up to our audience to come in and offer questions and to have a bit of a discussion. And I'll kick something off. So I was reading a really wonderful article by Sara. So Sara, I will come to you with this question first, which is, I think you said something in your article recently about COVID and the way in which inclusion, as we've seen in the work that I do in the UK, certainly, there's been a far more pronounced way of understanding the systemic nature of which those who are otherwise underprivileged or excluded from society have been disproportionately affected. And I think what you were able to say and share was actually there's been an opportunity and a focus on those communities now where some improvements have been made. And I think if I quote you, many in the disability community have been sharing a combination of validation and frustration that many of the accommodations we have been requesting or demanding from our employers, such as remote work options, paid sick leave, other flexible policies, have suddenly become enacted, having been denied for us for so long. And I want to really get into this, and I want to ask the question, and I know what your answer was, but I want to open this up to you first. What is the balance of being frustrated and being appreciative of this so that these changes are sustainable and long-term? Sara, can I ask you first?
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much. I mean, it is true. It's the balance of being frustrated. I mean, COVID has shed light on the exclusion of disability from the systemic exclusion of disability from in our systems, and whether it's in healthcare or other types of kind of systems, right? And it really shed light on this, and it is frustrating in many ways seeing that and seeing how, like, when COVID hit, people started coming up with solutions that we've been asking for a very long time. Now, I think as a disability community and a community at large, this is an opportunity to actually look at the systemic challenges of inclusion of disability, and how do we actually be part of the solution, not as beneficiaries, right, of the solution, but as partners to make sure that our voice is being heard, that it's integrated for the long term and the sustainability. So, but the frustration part also comes from at the point of, like, man, we still have to keep on advocating and advocating and advocating, but that's the reality, unfortunately. I think it's important for all of us as a society to see this as an opportunity, but also as a value for everyone when we are systemically addressing disability inclusion. So,
thank you, Sara. Manal.
I just wanted to make a comment. Actually, this is a perfect example of what I was speaking to earlier about positionality and understanding privilege over oppression, because what that example is exactly that. So as a privileged person, we have the privilege to go to work, and if you do not have a disability, and able to have many opportunities for all jobs or various jobs. But our positionality also causes that oppression for people who cannot go to work and are not able to do that. And we, in a way, create this sort of situation of, well, we're not going to be flexible for people who are different. We're not going to make any changes in policy when it easily could have been done, as Sara mentioned, and as we've all seen. Remote working could have been a great solution for many people a long time ago, especially depending on their jobs. And it just was not an option because the privileged people were there to keep that structure, that system in place, which denied access to others. And I think, if anything, I'm hoping that this pandemic has really, really opened up so many of our eyes, our eyes to this. What are we doing? What are we doing every day that excludes other people? And that, as Heidi was mentioning, that we're not speaking and helping them also. This allyship that also Sara is talking about, being part of helping in this cause is something that's really important. I think we don't have to explain why we want to have better rights for people with disabilities. There doesn't have to be a personal story or a personal effect. This is about humanity. This is about people and human rights. And this is about us checking what we have and making sure, does everyone have that? Shouldn't everyone have that? And how best can we do the right things to make that possible. Because really, to me, it's a very simple equation, and I'll make this one quick. The equation is, you know, you have a person with a disability, and you have two people, sorry, let's say two different people with disabilities, and one has barriers and one doesn't. The barriers that I'm talking about are institutional, they're attitude barriers, stigmas, stereotype, etc. And they can also be physical barriers. The other is a society which has disabled those as much as possible. What you then have is one person with a disability having an absolute lack of participation in society, and then you have another person with disability who not only can participate in society, but can add value, which is what Sara was also talking about at the beginning, which is looking at it from the value lens. And I think this is where we need to work on that enabling of society. It's not that difficult, it's not that complex. There's the part of it which we talk about, which is empathy, which we should all have, compassion and understanding, but they are definitely all these three barriers, for example, that I mentioned, that could easily be dismantled, improved on, and changed, just like what happened with COVID, which happened in an instant. And I think it would make a huge difference to the inclusive discourse.
Thank you, Manal. And Heidi, I'll come to you. And again, a similar question and your responses to what you've heard so far. And I have an additional question for you, which is, in a society or in societies often run by a potentially consumerist, limited supply and narrative of there's nothing for the whole. If I give something, something's taken away from me. And so in this notion of inclusion, as Manal has described, where actually, and Sara has said it earlier, which is actually there is huge value to be added. This isn't an exceptional thing. There is a value add here of inclusion. Do you have good examples of that's happened? And if you could share some, that would be really great. You're on mute.
Absolutely. So again, in my line of work, I learned very quickly that this idea that we are all going to come together because it's the right thing to do, because it's the good thing to do, because it's the human thing to do, that doesn't really wash all the time in a harsh real world. The real world, as you said, Nizamuddin, the real world is, okay, checks and balances, what's in it for me, how do we have a competitive edge? The real sad reality is those of us, I think we're getting much better now, and we're getting much savvier at creating those business cases and those real life cases on how there is an added, there's a return on investment for everything that we do. So today, there's a very well-known slogan within the area of disability work: what's good for disability is good for everyone. There are amazing solutions. I can give you a really simple example. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the US and Walgreens. Walgreens started out, you know, this whole idea where I can go to any state and get my prescription filled. Would you believe that that was based because somebody at Walgreens had somebody with a disability that they wanted to hire to give them the opportunity to have work and give them that potential to be able to be independent, have a salary and go on work. But they needed a system that was foolproof so they wouldn't make a mistake in filling these prescriptions. So they came up with this amazing IT system where things could be filled. And that turned into a service that I could fill your prescription anywhere around the country. Today, nobody knows the actual beginnings of that service, but it was based to be inclusive of somebody with disability. We see that with a lot of companies, but unfortunately, I think there was a comment here in the chat, you know, do we need to do more PR? There's not a lot of highlighting of these cases in a lot of these big forums. We need to be more mainstream in things like the World Economic Forum, in the G20. How are we making these discussions core to economic discussions and innovation discussions that are driving the world? Because the more you stay in your pond of disability, you have to be in the ocean of mainstreaming, because you're preaching to the choir in the pond of disability. We all understand, we all we all empathize with each other, but we have to be speaking the mainstream. And that's going to take time to change the mindset as well.
Thank you. And that's absolutely spot on in terms of where I want to go. And Sara, I'm going to come to you with the question that Heidi is referring to. It's from Zakir, and he says, I believe partnership could only start with wide awareness in society. Unfortunately, we have a huge gap between feelings of pity and charity versus actual inclusion and pulling everyone along and moving forward towards a common goal. So he's asked the question, do we need to focus more on PR around sustainable actions, ongoing events featuring people with disability in various forms to augment a reality? What do you think? And specifically, because this is your area of work, things that have worked for you in that area.
I mean, definitely, I'm going to build off of what Heidi mentioned. Definitely, we need more awareness, but here's the thing. More awareness in a, like Heidi was saying, in a mainstream way. And more awareness, yes, there's a lot of, right now, if you think about the narrative out there in disability, what is it? It's either the charity narrative, oh, poor this person, ya haram, let's help them out. Or the other, which I call it inspiration porn in the disability, this is how we call it. Like, oh my God, this person is amazing. They're able to, whatever it is, like eat or live alone, whatever it is, right? Like, we need to come to a point where we're mainstreaming disability and people with disability as a part of our society, that people with disabilities can be active contributors and all that kind of stuff. And we need to bring it forward, yes, through media, through every single sector, in a way, not siloed. Like Heidi was saying, and this happens a lot, the disability conversation is always, you know, and it's on its own corner, whatever it is, and we're speaking to an echo chamber, right? We need to make sure that the disability conversation is part of, when we're talking about health policies, social policies, whatever it is, you know, part of every single part of, you know, sector and space that we're in. So there's a lot of work to be done. It is really hard to stick to that mainstream narrative and really make sure, and I'm using the word with quotes around it, normalizing disability as part of our, you know, part of our fabric, part of an identity that we want to embrace. It's not a charity and it's not inspiration porn. So, yeah.
All right, thank you so much. And Manal, on that specific point, I think we heard earlier, I think it was from Sara, who talked about the importance of being seen, and therefore the importance of narratives and the role of culture and arts in doing that. How do you see the role of culture and arts, and generally, and again, in the work that I do around social integration in the UK, they say the arts are the most amazing way because they are the most disarming way of allowing people to have empathy, to have compassion. So could you maybe give us some ways and examples that you have seen where on an issue like this around inclusion and disability and people with disabilities, where we're trying to mainstream it, quote unquote, without it becoming exceptionalized? How can we use more of the arts and cultures?
I 100% believe this, and I've seen it in action. And I think many people who are involved and, let's say, practice or participate in cultural and artistic programming and, you know, access to these to arts and culture can definitely see the power that it has and the way in which it can be used as this vehicle for social change and social awareness about different issues. For me, I have never approached the museum world that I work in as, you know, this is a museum and I have a lovely collection and I just want to make sure it's taken the best care of and it's researched well. That's never been my absolute focus. It is part of my job, but the majority of what I focus on is education and inclusiveness in terms of how can we be socially responsible in our communities? How can we become community centers rather than, you know, beautiful museums and beautiful collections? And that means putting a lot of effort into programming, whether that's workshops, summer camps, but also exhibition programming, or using the collection as a way to talk about inclusiveness. And when we talk about inclusiveness, for example, we're talking about inclusiveness from, you know, including people of a different gender, different ethnic background, different, you know, class, age. So there's that. And then there's also looking at the aspect of people with disabilities and how that's all part of this inclusive conversation. And any marginalized group basically can be and is easily represented within a lot of our collections and with who we work with. So for me, there's been a number of initiatives we've done and exhibitions that we've done that really focus on this. And I can actually, one I can think of is we had an exhibition, I think it would have been 2 years ago, which was with an artist who's also the director of the MIT Future Heritage Lab. And she works with refugees and refugee camps over the last 10 years, and has really looked, and her particular artwork was looking at the, you know, sort of this over excess of textile industry and all these textiles that are sent to refugee camps that are never used, but also about placemaking and how a lot of refugee areas don't allow for lots of things to happen, like a place to gather or to be able to hang something in your shelter. There's this idea of we don't want permanence. But one of the things that I thought was interesting is that there's a huge number. There's like 15% of refugees that are just Palestinian refugees. So we're not even talking about all the other refugees in the world, but just those that she was looking at in Jordan, for example, in Lebanon, 15% of them have disability. That's a huge number. And you know, using this exhibition was a great way to shed light on that. And as Heidi said, give them a voice. They have a voice. It's just not being heard or not being seen by the mainstream public. So having a museum, which is either free or has a free exhibition, as in this case, having public programming where people can see representation of these children, adults with disability of all different, but also seeing what are they saying about how they're living, how they feel about different issues and topics. And it's just making what also Sara said, making this idea of anyone with any type of disability not being seen in this, you know, this binary, you're either, yes, a superhero, inspirational person, or you're someone to feel sorry for. But it's the full range, just like with any other person. There has to be that middle space. And I think the museums and programming that we do is part of that. And having programs for people that specifically target, for example, Arabs who are deaf. So, you know, teaching, for example, our guides in our museums to learn Arabic Sign Language so that they can help when, you know, deaf people come to the museum. This has been really extremely helpful in bringing in a whole new community that was otherwise never there. We have statistics. When we did not offer programs in autism, it's 0, 0, 0 of any of those people. And then suddenly offer programs, and then we have, you know, 200.
Thank you so much. I mean, we could speak for hours about this topic. It's such an incredibly important topic. I know I said we would finish on time, and the British in me is wanting to be prompt, so we might go a little bit over. But I wanted to quickly share contributions from our community, because we asked them, can you give us good examples of inclusion that you've seen? Catherine from the Yale Center for British Arts has access programs from the education department. We'll share this with everybody. Gada has a social initiative called I Am With You, creates accessible space for people with special needs, and have assisted the Museum of Happiness, which was created by The Gathering in the Riyadh area. Thank you for sharing. And then there's I have a couple of questions that I want to almost end with. So there's a question here by Amjad from the International Federation of Red Cross, which is, so coming from the international humanitarian community, the question he's asking is, what are we not doing well that we need to improve collectively? And conversely, is there anything that is being done well that should be replicated? I think it's a good opportunity for you to share anything that you've seen. And then let's go around, and if I come to Heidi first with that question.
So to make this simple, doing this well really means making it part of your conscious DNA. I mean, the simplest answer is diversity and inclusion, and being as inclusive as you can be can't be an afterthought, whether you're planning a project or even just planning a birthday party for your own child and wanting to invite their friends from school. Inclusion and diversity we always say diversity is a fact, inclusion is a choice. We make conscious choices to be inclusive on a daily basis. So the easiest way to make this happen is whatever you're doing, start by saying, if human beings are going to interact with this, and even today with technology, how am I going to make it as inclusive as possible? That has to be the first question you ask before you plan any project or any business or any service. And from there you build out. If you have that in mind, it will be phenomenal. One, you will either become very inclusive, or two, you will know what your restrictions are and at least can be honest about it. You can say, I know, but these are the reasons why I can't do this, and either ask for help and collaborate with others that can get you there, or you just at least acknowledge what your restrictions are.
Thank you, Heidi. And Sara, the same question to you, but I have a couple of comments that I want to share with you from Gabby. Well said, Sara. Even with empathy, we make many mistakes as a society that reduce letting all people be mainstream. We have a great, I think, forgive me if I'm pronouncing it, Renate. Sara, you're spot on with your statement on mainstreaming credibility, and talks about the Cedra Foundation aiming at updating the narrative of people with disabilities in media and marketing. And really powerful endorsement of the notion of mainstreaming and moving away from exceptionalizing. And so going back to the question that Amjad asked, which was around what more can sectors do, and what have you seen that's really working, that if you had a magic wand today, you could replicate and scale overnight?
Yeah, so I would echo what Heidi said, and I would add from the get-go, as Heidi said, from the get-go, really understanding and knowing and wanting to include disability, and wanting and seeing the value. And then when you're building out the system to be inclusive, there's a phrase said, nothing about us without us. Let's make sure actually the disability community is part of building that system, right, from the get-go. It's not later on or afterthought. And again, I go back to this mindset aspect. I've worked with a lot of international organizations where they want, they have it as a policy like, oh, we have to include disability, but it's done in a way like, oh, we have to. This is like, so again, it's a mindset like I would actually, if I can do a wand, I would do a mindset training for everyone across all organization and across the entire, from leadership all the way down, this, mindset training of really understanding and wanting to include disability, wanting to include seeing the value. So, yeah.
Thank you. And Manal?
I think there's two things. Probably one has already been said, and it was something that I agree and echo that Sara and Heidi said, which was about, the conscious effort, and that being conscious of what you're doing and being constant with it also, right? So it's a practice that you have to work on every day forever. It's not something, as she said, that you tick a box or it's an afterthought and you think you've achieved inclusiveness. The other thing that Sara just mentioned, which is to me is the key, is that anyone and people who do not have disabilities should not be monopolizing the space on this topic. As she just rightly said, people with disabilities have to be there, they have to be visible, they have to be part of the system and the solution and everything else. I find it, in my case, I have seen it where you'll have a room of 30 people talking about disability and how to make it better, and they may have one person there that actually fits into that category of one of these disabilities. And I think this is problematic. It's not enough to have one person. It really should be a lot more balanced with a lot more voices of different disabilities and those that are visible and invisible, because I think that's another topic. But one other thing I think I would say is, I feel what we're lacking, or what we could improve, is proximity. Something I learned when I did the Aspen Fellowship, and it was about how much you really understand or can empathize with something the closer you are to it. And I 100% understand that in terms of the more representation there is of people in the media, in your daily life, how many people you meet personally that have a disability, you are more likely to fight for their rights and to want them to be integrated and to work for inclusiveness. The further you are away from people, that you just never see or never think about because they're just not in your periphery, then you will not be part of that solution.
Thank you, Manal, again. And I think a really powerful reinforcement of your challenge to us all of challenging our own privilege every single day. So, I mean, today we heard news in the UK that a vaccine has been approved, which means there's a hope in our society of what a post-COVID world might look like. So I want to end on a positive note by asking each of you in a very succinct way, if we may, because we're 5 minutes over, what continues to give you hope? So that our audience and our attendees today can leave feeling hopeful about a world that we can create where some of the challenges that we've described we will overcome and to build that good society. So if I may start with Sara, what's given you hope?
I think the allies, the conversations I've seen with a lot of different allies and spaces really thinking about disability, post-COVID, sustainability, and that gives me hope. And I think so just to be succinct.
Thank you. Heidi?
What gives me hope every day is staying connected to the people around me. I try and make a very concerted effort to stay in touch with, I'm a CEO, but I like to be on the ground and I like to interact. And in my whole career, it's that mother who says, I will never forget, just you smiling at my child changed my world. Do never underestimate your smallest gesture can be the biggest change for people in the world. So take time, make those small gestures, and those big gestures will come eventually, but it's those small things that build up. And, when you hear somebody saying that, I pray for you every day because of that little thing you did for me, that always gives me the push that I need to keep going.
Wow, thank you. Manal?
Oh gosh, it's always hard to follow up with from Heidi. Most positive person I know. And I can imagine only ever sees clouds with gold linings. But I think what gives me hope, honestly, has been I've noticed that there's been a lot more discussion about these things, a lot more openness and transparency about these issues, especially through social media and other means. I feel that 10 years ago or so, these topics were just not discussed. We didn't maybe have the right platforms, or we just didn't have the right people, whether they were celebrities or otherwise, to really kind of sometimes, bring light to these issues. And I feel that this discussion, I find it very positive because I see that it's going somewhere, beneficial, useful. It's allowing people to realize that they don't all have the answers, but that's okay. And it's sort of this culture of, keep expanding your knowledge, learn. No one's perfect, but we can make a better society together. And the more we know and the more we learn and we're open to that, the better things can be. And I feel positive about the access to a lot of great information and resources and people that we have out there to help us.
Well, Manal, Heidi, Sara. Heidi, you have your hand up.
Just one second, one little thing just to keep everybody. There's a philosophy in Africa called Ubuntu. And one of my favorite stories of Ubuntu, I love Ubuntu, but anyway, one of my favorite stories is in a village, if somebody makes a mistake, they bring them to the center of the village, and for 2 days, they stand as the village, reminding that person of what they've done right. Because we as humans, we will make mistakes, but we were born good and our core is good. Remember, our cores are good. Sometimes we have to be reminded and we have to be supported in what we do good. So we should all go out and do good and remind each other that we're doing good.
If I'm ever having a bad day, Heidi, expect a phone call from me. Heidi, Sara, Manal, you give me hope. So thank you so much for your time. More important, for the work that you do on this agenda every single day, for educating us. And as we look to tomorrow, a day where, it should be every day, as we hear about all these United Nations days, it should be every day. And I hope practically this group that has come together will leave tomorrow, use our privilege to do more to advocate on this important topic. Emma, over to you.
Well, I just want to reiterate, really, thank you so much, Sara, Manal, and Heidi. Thank you for really what you do in making our societies more inclusive, in building the good society. This is our last webinar of 2020. And from all of the Good Society Forum team, we want to wish our panelists, our audience, happy holidays, and we look forward to seeing you again in the new year.